The Montana Territory, 1888, a place where winters came early, where the mountains stood like silent judges, and where a single rumor could end a person's life faster than frostbite. The small town of Ash Hollow sat in the valley's shadow, a place of faith, pride, and secrets buried under snow. Clara Mae Thompson had arrived in Ash Hollow 2 years before that cruel winter. A schoolteacher from back east, she'd come with little more than a trunk, a Bible, and a dream of shaping young minds. Her laughter filled the tiny schoolhouse, and her kindness softened even the hardest hearts. People admired her, at least until the whisper began. It started in the back pew of the church, between two women who lived for other people's sins. "She's with child," one said, voice low but sharp, "and there's no ring on her finger." By the next morning, the words had spread faster than wildfire across dry grass. By noon, Claire's name was no longer spoken in kindness. By sundown, she'd been dismissed from her position, and the children she loved were forbidden to see her. She didn't cry in public. She packed her books quietly, her hands trembling as she placed her student slates in a neat pile. No one helped her. Even Pastor Green avoided her eyes. When she stepped out of the schoolhouse for the last time, the winter wind caught her shawl, and that's when she realized she was truly alone. For days she stayed in the small boarding room behind the bakery, eating little, praying much. The rumor wasn't true. There had been no man, no sin, no secret, just the jealousy of another woman and the cruel delight of those who believed her. But in a place like Ash Hollow, innocence wasn't enough. Reputation was everything. Then came the blizzard, the kind that turned day into night, swallowing sound and sight alike. The boarding house owner told her she couldn't stay, said a fallen woman brought bad fortune, and so with nowhere left to go, Clara wrapped herself in her thin shawl and stepped into the storm. Snow clung to her lashes, her breath came in gasps, and her boots sank deep into drifts. Each step was heavier than the last. She thought of her mother back east, of her father's words, "The world will try to break you, Clara. Don't let it." But as the wind howled like a living thing, she wondered if she had any fight left. Hours passed. Her strength faded. Then, through the blur of white, she saw light, faint, flickering, a cabin lantern swinging in the storm. She stumbled toward it, fell, and didn't rise again. The next thing she knew, warmth, the smell of smoke, a deep voice saying, "Easy now, you're safe." When her eyes opened, she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, with a beard the color of storm clouds, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. Liam Sterling, the richest, most reclusive rancher in the valley. People said he'd buried his heart with his wife 3 winters ago and had no use for company or kindness. But that night, he carried a stranger into his cabin and stayed awake beside her fire until dawn. When she could speak, she tried to thank him, to explain, but her voice broke. "I didn't do what they said," she whispered. Liam only nodded. "Don't matter much what they say," he said quietly. "Only matters what's true." Over the next few days, she regained her strength. Liam gave her space, a small corner of the cabin, a blanket, and silence. He wasn't a man of many words, but she noticed the way he made sure her fire never went out, the way he'd leave food by her bedside without saying a word. Slowly, the quiet between them became something gentle, something safe. Then one morning, he saddled his horse and told her, "Town's got a long memory. If you're going back, go ready." She nodded, determined. She wouldn't hide, she would face them. When they rode into Ash Hollow, the air felt heavier. The townsfolk stopped and stared. Claire kept her chin high, until a voice from the crowd sneered. "Didn't expect to see her again." Someone laughed. The pastor stepped forward, frowning, but before Clara could speak, Liam dismounted. He looked every man in the eye and said in that calm, steady voice, "She's my wife." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara's breath caught.
She turned to him, eyes wide, but he didn't look her way.
"Any man got a problem with that," he said, "can take it up with me." No one did. Not that day. And so, with one sentence, he gave her protection, a name, a chance to start again. It wasn't the truth, not yet, but it was the only way to save her. Back at the ranch, the lie became a life. She helped in the kitchen, tended the horses, brought warmth to the cold halls. Liam, for all his silence, began to soften. He found himself waiting for her laughter, listening for her humming as she baked bread. Sometimes at night, he'd catch her by the window, looking at the stars, and he'd feel something stir, something he thought had died with his wife. Weeks turned into months. Spring came. The valley bloomed again. And one evening as the sun dipped low, Liam found Clara sitting by the fence, tears shining in her eyes. "Do you regret saving me?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No, ma'am. Only regret I got is not finding you sooner." From that moment, something changed. He began to court her, quietly, without words, in the way he fixed her chair when it broke, or the way he always poured her tea before his own. She loved him in silence too, through the notes she left by his hat, through the meals she cooked with care. But peace never lasts long on the frontier. One day, a stranger rode into town, tall, smug, with the eyes of a man who thrived on pain. His name was Charles Whitaker, the very man who'd started the rumor. He wanted land, money, and the satisfaction of seeing Clara ruined again. When he found out where she was, he came to the ranch. "You lied to everyone," he sneered, "but I'll tell them the truth. You'll lose everything again." Liam stepped forward. "You've said enough." Whitaker laughed. "You'll defend her, a woman with no virtue?" The sound of a gun cocking silenced him. Liam's voice was low, deadly calm. "You call her that again, and you'll never speak another word." Whitaker left, for the moment. But lies have roots that dig deep. The next day, the sheriff came, asking questions. Liam told the truth as far as it mattered. "She's my wife," he said again, though this time it wasn't a lie, not in his heart. That night, in the quiet of the cabin, Clara turned to him. "You shouldn't have to keep lying for me," she whispered. He shook his head. "Ain't lying if it's what I want." And then, for the first time, he took her hand, rough, warm, steady. "Clara, I never made you a promise, but I'll make one now. You'll never face the cold alone again." They married beneath the cottonwood tree when the first wildflowers bloomed. The whole valley came, even those who once turned their backs. When the preacher asked if he'd take her as his wife, Liam said simply, "Already have." Years later, when their children played by that same tree, Clara would tell him the story, not of the lies, but of the vow that saved her, how a man who'd lost everything taught her what love truly meant. And every winter, when snow began to fall and the wind howled outside, she'd sit by the fire, hold Liam's hand and whisper, "You kept your word." And he'd smile the same quiet, steady way he did that first night and say, "Always will."